So next, we're having the presentation an interest-free network state towards Bitcoin sound finance and energy abundance. And it all relates in a principle of how inflation is affecting the whole world since the gold standard ended. So for this presentation, we have Mark Zubov. We're having just a little bit of issues.
Yeah, I think she lost her phone, so this is an emergency call. Yeah, she made the presentation, so we are going to wait. Yeah. Let's go. We are going to start with Mark Zubov, if I say your name, okay? So he's the founder and CEO of Yuma Finance, an interest-free network state aimed at bringing Bitcoin and sound finance to emerging markets. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Mark. So a lot of us Bitcoiners like to think that Bitcoin is inevitable, right? That one day, we would not have to worry about the price of Bitcoin. We'll be able to use Bitcoin to pay for anything, whether it's food or energy. So I tend to think that actually that's not the case. I think Bitcoin is not necessarily inevitable, and I think to make Bitcoin success, we do need to build parallel structures that make it possible. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today. So I'll start with a little history. So we all know what happened in 1971. After 1,000 years of commodity-backed money, we completely went off gold standard and entered the fiat era. Since then, we've seen stagnation in productivity, we've seen stagnation in wages, and increased wealth inequality. And also, despite the exponential technological growth, which you can see here on the left side, the Moore's law has been playing out perfectly for the last 50 years. We had a significant decrease in the cost of energy, solar, nuclear. We've seen exponential decrease in the cost per human genome. But at the same time, the things that actually matter, like healthcare, education, energy, have actually increased in prices, which is really the result of, one, the fiat system, and two, the regulations that come with the fiat system, which is why we still don't have nuclear. So what happens in the fiat system is that to maintain our purchasing power, we're actually forced to risk our savings, right? We have to invest, whether it's equities or real estate or Bitcoin. But what's crazy to me is that no matter what you invest in, if you take long enough time frame, nothing actually beats money printing. So no asset has outperformed the increase in the rate of money supply growth over the last 50 years. And what's even more important is that in the last 50 years, we have not really been able to harness energy potential, which historically has been the key to human prosperity. I mean, some people think that we should be using less energy. I mean, it couldn't be further from the truth. Historically, the more energy we use, the better we live. But that hasn't been the case since we went on the fiat standard. As you can see, the electricity prices have actually gone up. We have not taken advantage of nuclear. We haven't taken advantage of solar. And we actually went off the Henry Adams curve, which basically is an exponential rise in our usage of energy, which correlates with the exponential rise in our economic growth. And so where we are today, today we have over 2 billion people who live in countries with a persistent 20% plus inflation, right? And obviously, if you live in South America, if you've been in South America, you know that's a problem common to pretty much every single country in this continent. And today, actually, global inflation is at its highest in the last 40 years. And you might think this only affects developing countries. That couldn't be further from the truth. All the fiat currencies, all the reserve currencies of the world are essentially designed to eventually collapse, right? We've seen that all and over again with Netherlands, with UK, and now we're seeing the US. I'm not saying the dollar is going to collapse tomorrow, but I think the trajectory is very clear. And what I found really crazy is this, from Lynn Eldon's recent book, The Broken Money, we saw that the number of dollars in supply has risen over 300 times in the last 100 years. So we cannot stop the, everyone is going to get rug pulled. That's the conclusion here. So everyone's impacted by inflation, but some are even more than others, right? So there is over 1 billion Muslims who live in countries with unstable currencies, who don't have access to dollars. But even if they had that access, even if they had access to basic financial instruments, they would not be able to use those instruments because they're all interest-based. So I'm assuming you guys don't know too much about Islamic finance, but the way I look at Islamic finance is really fair finance, or I like to call it sound finance. So it's all about risk sharing. You cannot create money out of nothing. Everything has to be backed by real assets. And the goal of Islamic finance is really to increase our human prosperity. And the problem here is that, the fiat system, as you guys know, is based on interest. So you cannot really have Islamic finance, in the fiat system. So what if you could build an alternative financial system that's not based on interest? Actually, historically, if you take a step back, all major Abrahamic religion used to reject the ideas of interest and usury. That's the case with Islam, that's the case with Christianity, that's the case with Judaism. What's really cool is, I was just reading this book, The First 5,000 Years by David Graeber, and it has a chapter about medieval Islam, and it basically draws parallel between medieval Islam and Austrian economics. So medieval Islam was one of those cases when the society functioned according to interest-free, usury-free laws, which were not dictated by the government, but were just dictated by the free markets, right? And it actually worked really well. People will be surprised, but medieval Islam was some of the most prosperous times in the human history. As you guys all know, that most religions eventually gave up on fighting usury, fighting history. That all happened in the last, around the year 1500, 1600. As for Islam, Islamic banks actually tried to stick to the original principles to solve this problem of interest. But as you guys know, the problem here is that the fiat system is based on interest. How can you have Islamic banking and call it Islamic if the fiat is based on creating money out of nothing, which is basically the exact opposite of what Islamic finance stands for. And I like this, I definitely recommend everyone to follow Haris Irfan, Safdar Alam, Secret Muslim Banker. They talk a lot about this, the intersection, the connection between Islamic finance and Bitcoin. So, there is this theory by Albert Hirschman, which basically addresses any political issue, right? It's like you always have three options, right? There is exit, voice, and loyalty. So, Muslims have really three options, right? They can stick to existing system. They can, you can stay, they can just trust the fiat system. They can try to change the fiat system, or they can do an exit, right? And I'm sure you guys can agree what could be an exit here. So again, I think it's impossible to change the financial system. It's impossible to change the Federal Reserve. Same way Satoshi didn't try to change the Federal Reserve. Satoshi invested in Bitcoin, right? And that's really where I see an opportunity. And I think Bitcoin, and many people would agree, it is the most Sharia compliant and also the most inflation resistant money that exists. So why does this matter, right? Let's say you're not a Muslim, like why would you even care? So I think the big picture here is that we are about to witness, a change in world order, which will be driven by the collision of three key forces, right? One, we are at the end of the long-term sovereign debt cycle. There is just too much debt in the system. Whether you look at the US, whether you look at Europe, all fiat regimes are indebted. There is no way out of it except for just printing more money. Again, the destiny is the same for any fiat regime. At the same time, we're seeing, what I would call the fall of the West and the rise of the East. So we're seeing the decay in Western institutions. We're seeing the rise of the East, but the rise of the East, I mean it not just in the literal terms, but more let's say, coming from it from a geopolitical lens, right? So the Pax Americana world order is coming to an end, and we are seeing the rise of the East. We're seeing that Asia, MENA, South America are having, a much bigger role in the world order, and that's gonna, keep happening over the next, I would say, 5 decades. The third trend is the technology-driven deflation, right? So there are two white papers that I think the most important white papers of the last 15 years. I mean, one, I'm sure you guys can guess which one it is the Bitcoin white paper. The other one is Attention is All You Need, which is really the paper that was written about, I think, 5 years ago, which has led to the invention of transformers, which has really led to the rise of AI in the next couple of years. In parallel to that, we've seen energy is becoming more and more becoming cheaper, both nuclear and solar. So everything is available for us to make energy abundance a reality. But the problem is that, as you probably know if you follow Jeff Booth, is that when you have a fiat system which is based on that and which cannot allow deflation, the technology cannot really make an impact, right? So when you have these three forces, what you know is that you need digital native money that is inflation resistant. And, oops, what happened? Can we? Sorry. All right, we're back. Sorry for that. So at the center of any change in world order, there is typically you have huge currency breakdown and a monetary revolution, right? There will be a debt crisis, there will be a lot of money printing, and there will be a new monetary regime coming out of this. So I'm sure we all hope that the big Bitcoin will lead this monetary revolution, or at least will play a big part of it, right? So same way we went from Bretton Woods, from gold-based system to the system based on fake money. Now we're going to go from fake money to Bitcoin. So I don't know how it's going to play out, right? I really don't know. There are many things we cannot predict. We cannot predict the timing of it. The only thing that's guaranteed, there will be pushback. The existing system will do everything to prevent this from happening. Same way it tried to prevent, same way it tried to confiscate gold in 1930s. Same thing is going to happen with Bitcoin. The more it rises, the more pushback we'll see, and whether it's going to be more control over crypto, more crackdown, whether there's going to be a rise of CBDCs, we don't know, but we know there will be pushback. And unlike what most people think, actually, wealth confiscation, capital controls is very common, even in the most developed countries. And we've seen it all and over again with the US, with UK, with Europe, with other countries. And so, it makes sense to think that it's going to happen again. And we've already seen the first glimpses of that, right? We have Operation Choke Point in the US. We have, FedNow, launch of FedNow, which I think we would all agree, they say it's not CBDC, but we can all agree that it's basically, they just using another language, right? It's like same way, you could say QE is not money printing, like we know what QE means. Same way, if they say FedNow is not CBDC, I mean, at the end of the day, we think that all roads lead to CBDCs. So what can we do with this, right? During the communist time in Czechoslovakia, you had this movement called Parallel Polis, which was essentially built with the goal to create this parallel society which would essentially, instead of trying to change, trying to fight the communism, they would build a new system parallel to the existing system, which would, in the end of the day, lead to to the fall of communism. And it, as we all know, that worked out really well. So what's the parallel society that we can build today? Balaji Srinivasan recently wrote this book called The Network State, which really builds upon those ideas that existed, like parallel societies. Highly recommend everyone to read the book. Essentially, the definition of a network state, it's a value-aligned digital community with the capacity for collective action and with the capacity to eventually gain diplomatic recognition. So what makes network state different from a classical nation state? I mean, one is digital first population. It has defined resources, which is more important than defined territory. There is governance, instead of the government. And there is an idea that at the end of the day, one day you can have diplomatic recognition, and we can essentially have our own different version, let's say, of a nation state. So what we think is that the Muslim world could actually play a huge role in building a network state based on sound money. Why? I mean, we see that the Muslims is the fastest growing demographic in the world by far. And I really like this idea of the minority rule, right? So what the minority rule is the idea from Nasib Taleb, is that when you have a small group of people, a small, but let's say big enough, let's say 4% of population, they have really strong views on things, they can influence the way the society functions. So for example, if 4% of population wants to eat kosher food or they want to eat halal food, the rest of the population will essentially follow them. Same way, what if 4% of population decides that we'll choose Bitcoin over CBDCs? Could that lead to the war, to Bitcoin taking over CBDCs? So this is what I found really interesting. You had these two articles that came out in the last 6 months or so. One was from IMF saying that CBDCs are actually incompatible with the rules of Islamic finance, and then on the other hand, you see Oman government now saying that Bitcoin is Sharia compliant, and actually Oman investing $2 billion in Bitcoin mining. So could it be that the minority rule plays out and we'll have the Muslim world actually adopt Bitcoin over CBDCs? So again, this is might sound like a crazy idea, but again, what we could unite, right? The Bitcoin crowd, the Muslim crowd, we all understand the issues with the fiat. We all understand the issues with interest. So could we, essentially expand our mindset and build an alternative financial system? So at UMA, which is the project that I'm building, we believe that that system is perverse, it's unjust, it's socially destructive. And what we are trying to do is access to fair, transparent, inflation-resistant, interest-free products for people across the globe. And really the vision is to build, to start with building a community and eventually build an interest-free network state. We do that in 3 phases. Start with the community first. We're looking for people who are interested in this whole idea of interest-free finance. We build a one-stop shop, essentially an app where you can access all kinds of interest-free financial products. And then eventually we want to have real physical presence, because I believe that until we have our own infrastructure, which enables some to have access to energy, access to housing, access to food by using Bitcoin, until we have all that infrastructure in physical world, we would not have mainstream adoption of Bitcoin. And again, the core of it is a very simple idea. We want people to have access to money that maintains its purchasing power over time. And I'm not saying it's Bitcoin going to $1 billion. It's more of like, what if the money just maintain its purchasing power, and we would not have to worry about investing in like all kinds of risky assets. And what we think is needed is like you need both the movement and you need the tools, right, to build a network state. So the movement, same with like Bitcoin, right? It's all about sound money, low time preference, maybe separation of money and state, anti-interest, energy abundance. But at the same time, you need to create tools, right? Which is make people everyday people be able to use those products that make their lives better, even if they don't care about the movement, right? So that's what we think like building a network state really means. So as a tool is really just like a digital bank type of app that we are currently building. It's not live yet, but basically it enables people to maintain their purchasing power over time in line with the interest-free finance principles. So first step, we enable people to invest stablecoins in real-world revenue-generating assets like energy infrastructure projects, like Bitcoin miners, commodity producers. We offer, obviously, people opportunity to buy Bitcoin. And the goal is also to launch a stablecoin that's going to be based on Bitcoin, built on top of Bitcoin. I mean, a lot of people would think, like, why do we need Bitcoin? Oh, I mean, why do we need stablecoins when we have Bitcoin? That's like a common piece of feedback I receive. But we think that, at the end of the day, people in emerging markets who live in paycheck to paycheck, today they really just need stable currency. They need dollars, unfortunately. They're not going to go from, Pakistani rupees to Bitcoin on day one. I think first they want to go to dollars, and then after that they'll go to the goal. They'll move towards Bitcoin. So there are many reasons why this could fail, right? In theory, but what if it could succeed? What if it succeeds? And the way I see it is basically it's a decentralized network state that has its own physical territories, which we can crowdfund, its own access to energy, which it can use for Bitcoin mining. And has its own infrastructure that enables people to live on the Bitcoin standard, and essentially profits from all that could actually be used to fund the citizens' basically lives in perpetuity. So, like, how do we go from this crazy idea and turning this into a real revolution? So, if you look at the history, big revolutions tend to start with an idea, really strong idea. And they turn into reality when this idea coincides with the technology of ambition, right? So, for example, in 1500s, there's been this, long-awaited movement of Reformation. It has not worked for like decades, right? The Catholic Church would shut down any attempts at, making Protestantism, major religion. But then what happened, printing press was invented, which made, assimilating information basically frictionless. And what we had, around this year 1600, we had, all kinds of different religions that emerged in Europe. And, people were really free to choose, wherever they want to, whichever religion they want to side with. So same way a printing press made information possible, we think that internet and Bitcoin make the, building the interest-free network state at least not impossible. So it might seem impossible today, right? But, as soon as we first just need to think, what if it is possible? And start working on this really step by step. So, a lot of people like to talk about, like 1971, like as I did earlier this presentation. But what if we go back to actually the good times, right? 1879, we went from being, hyperinflation under Lincoln. We went back to the gold standard, which actually led to the golden age of innovations. Like most of the things used today, we actually invented between like 1880 to 1910. We had prices fell by 30%, real GDP increased by 85%. So, now that we have technology, we have Bitcoin, we have energy. So could this happen again, right? If we move back to Bitcoin standard. So yeah, I mean, obviously I would love you to either join our society to make sound money and energy abundance a reality. But even if not, I think I would like everyone to think about building parallel societies. I do believe that just holding Bitcoin or just promoting Bitcoin is not enough. We need to build those structures. Whether it's charity cities, private cities, digitally first communities that are all about making this basically happen in the real world. And who knows, maybe one day we could become a type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale, which basically means like, what if we could build a civilization that could harness all the energy striking from Earth, make obviously energy abundance a reality, and make human prosperity real. So yeah, if you want to learn more, if you want to connect, please reach out. You can find me on Telegram, Twitter, email. Always happy to connect with like-minded people, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. And we're going to give